Hi, this is Abbe and Simone from the Discover Animals website. We're here today with Michaela Strachan. Hi Michaela.
Hello.
Thanks for being with us.
Pleasure.
We're going to start off with a few questions, so Simone's going to start.
Okay, so thanks Michaela, hi. Can you recall your earliest wildlife encounter and how did this shape your love of nature?
I think it was probably when I was 12 and we went on holiday to Kenya and we spent some days in the Masai Mara. And we went to a place called Treetops, although that's not in the Masai Mara, but we did two sort of mini safaris. And I think that was when I really woke up to the fact that this was amazing, you know, to be in Africa and to be sitting on the roof of a vehicle while you're driving along looking at wildlife. And of course, in those days, I mean, I'm 53, so that would have been 70 something. You know, it wasn't such a common holiday to do, so it was quite exotic.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just really opened my eyes to how amazing wildlife was.
That was your trigger, you think?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I have to say, I trained in musical theatre. So that's what I trained to do. I trained to be a dancer and a singer and an actress. So I sort of then fell into wildlife presenting. So I don't come from a zoology or biology background. So I've always sort of tried to keep saying to people that I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a wildlife enthusiast.
Yes.
That has come into it later in life. But I think from 12 years old, that definitely triggered an interest. And I remember reading the Born Free books and just wanting to be Joy Adamson.
Yeah.
And live in the bush with all these wild animals. So, you know, I haven't quite got to that stage, but I've got near that stage.
The Really Wild Show, the first.
No, it was actually a
Wildlife
programme
something
called OWL TV, which stood for Outdoors and Wildlife, and that went out on ITV and Channel 4. But it was mainly kids that presented the pieces, and I linked it all together. So, you know, my knowledge in those days was we'd go off to a zoo, we'd look at the board in front of the animals and quickly think up a link, you know, oh, Borneo, orangutans, okay. Oh, hello, these are orangutans, they come from Borneo. You know, so our knowledge was not great, me and the team that I was filming with, but all we had to do was links at the time. So as the years have gone on, I've obviously gained a lot more experience and a lot more knowledge, and with that, I've become a lot more passionate.
Oh, great, yeah. We're enjoying Spring Watch. I have done the garden watch.
Oh, good, excellent, good
the
for
worm
you.
thing with my eldest son who's 6, but he's been ill this week, but I'm going to try and do that next week.
Excellent news.
But we just wondered what your favourite moment so far of this series.
Do you know, I always find it difficult to say because we're 2 weeks in, and I think after you've done 3 weeks, you can pick a favourite. But I think now, up to now, the goshawk nest. I mean, goshawks, I do like big, sexy birds, I have to say. So, you know, being able to see goshawks with chicks, you know, in a nest with cameras on is amazing. Same with the golden eagles, amazing. But if we're talking about our live nests that we've got, I think the most interesting one is probably, for me, is the woodpecker nest. Because we've never had woodpeckers on the show before. And it's, you know, quite an incredible view. I mean, when would you ever be able to see inside the tree? You know, we've done nest boxes for years, and they're always interesting, but, you know, we're quite familiar with blue tits in a nest box now. Even the goldeneye, gorgeous as it is, we're familiar with that. But to have a camera in a nest box, in a nest with woodpeckers in, and to see them, I mean, just yesterday we were watching them. They're still half blind, and they're climbing up the side of the nest. So they're climbing up the inside of the tree, if you know what I mean. And it's just fascinating to watch. And we were saying they make this noise. They keep making a noise.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would have thought that's a very negative thing for a chick to do. Constantly making a noise, drawing attention, and also what a waste of energy. You know, it's fine chirping when the adult comes in, but to make that noise all the time.
Yeah.
And in the past, we have seen a stoat go in and predate them. I mean, not when we've had a camera inside, but a cameraman has been filming the nest from the outside. So, you know, they are predated, and it's really not a great idea. I feel like going and saying, shush, if you want to live, shush.
Because I watched the other day when the fawn, or is it the kid?
It's a kid, yeah.
But the way they hide in the undergrowth, I found fascinating. I didn't realise that.
So they're in the underground. Undergrowth for 20, 23 hours a day when they're little.
Which I hadn't realised.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
It's interesting.
Do you have any wildlife projects, campaigns or charities that you're really passionate about?
I think most of the ones I'm passionate about are ones that I've worked with. So, for instance, I live in South Africa, and I did a series on the African penguin and worked with a charity called Sankob, which is a seabird rescue centre. And they do a project where they take in late-born chicks and they rehabilitate them and they put them back in the wild to bolster the number of penguins. And the late-born ones often don't survive because the adults by that stage have started to molt. And so if they're molting, they can't fish, and the late-borns perish. And so because penguin numbers have dropped so dramatically, African penguin numbers have dropped so dramatically, it's important to bolster the population while they try and think of what else they can do to try and save the African penguin, which they are doing. They're trying to create a new colony, which is very difficult. It's a long story, but that's what they're trying to do. And other ones I've worked with are Animals Asia, and we did years ago on Really Wild Show, we did a thing on the bear bile industry in China where they farm bears for their bile. So I'm passionate about that. Elephants in the orphanage in Kenya, the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust. Obviously that's close to my heart as well. So as I say, it tends to be the ones that I've worked with and got to know the people, and it's the people as well that I've got so much admiration for. Again, we went to Cameroon once and we did an orphanage there for chimps and gorillas, and that people give up so much of their lives to look after these animals. And I think people think it's terribly glamorous. Let's go and look after little baby gorillas and chimps in Cameroon. But oh my goodness, it's hard work. And when you're in those sort of countries, you are banging your head against a brick wall to try and get change. China, for instance, with the bear bile industry, it was a fantastic lady that was there. And it's just so difficult to make change. And the other one is the orangutans in Borneo, and I did 2 series of something called Orangutan Diaries there, and that's the Borneo Orangutan Survival Foundation, and that's another one that I've been there, I've experienced it, I got to know the lady that ran it at the time. So yeah, lots of projects. I tend to get very close to the projects that I'm filming.
Yeah, which is nice.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And we wondered what your most unusual or memorable animal experience has been so far, if you have one.
Well, it's quite hard to answer that, but the most amazing trip that I think I've done, and the one that, so many stick in my memories for different reasons, but I was lucky enough to do a filming trip to Antarctica, and I think that's the most extraordinary place to visit. Yeah. And what I love about Antarctica is nobody owns it. It's nobody is from Antarctica. No one was ever born in Antarctica. And the only people that live there are the scientists. So they're only there for a while and then they leave again. So it was just the most extraordinary landscape. And I think it's one of those final wildernesses that's left. And obviously, there are all sorts of problems going on in the Antarctic. Yeah. But there's still a lot of wilderness and a lot of wildlife that's very untouched.
So have you been to the Arctic as well?
Yeah, I have been to the Arctic, yeah. The Arctic is more accessible to tourism, whereas the Antarctic isn't. I know lots of people do go to the Antarctic, but it's not common. It's not like your average holiday, is it? Whereas the Arctic, as I say, is more accessible. Not obviously to the pole, but to go within the Arctic Circle and see wildlife. But that was also extraordinary. We did polar bears, and that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that must be. Yeah.
How close did you get?
Too close, actually.
Oh, really?
Well, no, sadly, we was going, again, it was a long time ago for the Really Wild Show, and we were in a place where the polar bears, they built a town, Churchill, in their migration path. And so they some of them go through the town and then they start raiding the rubbish and then it becomes a problem. So they often dart them and then they pick them up in a net underneath a helicopter and take them back out onto the tundra. Okay. So we got right close to it. Yeah. And I've also done another one for a programme called Michaela's Wild Challenge years ago, where we had to dart a polar bear from the air and do lots of scientific tests on it. And we'd have to take a skin sample and blood samples and all sorts of things. And so again, I was right next to this polar bear, which was extraordinary because they're one of the few animals that actively will hunt humans. So to be right next to it, kind of hoping it won't wake up while you're there.
So dangerous. Yeah.
This is quite difficult to answer because it's, if you could bring an extinct animal back to life, which one would it be and why?
Well, there is
bring
one.
Them all back.
No, but there is one because it's particularly poignant to me, and it's the northern white rhino. And the northern white rhino became extinct, well, practically extinct, very recently. And the last male was called Sudan, and he died, and to be honest, I can't remember, I think it was last year sometime. And there are females left, but there's no males left that they know of. And I went to see that rhino, Sudan, before he died. So a few years ago, we went to Kenya, and what I find really sad is my son was with me. My son's 14, and so he must have been about 12 at the time. And, you know, he touched that last rhino, and I think that's really poignant for him at that age to have touched an animal that now is extinct. And I should say it's the northern white rhino. Yes. We still have southern white rhinos, because I remember when I tweeted that, suddenly everyone thought the white rhino had disappeared. Yeah. You know, we do still have the southern white rhino. But I just think to lose an iconic, what we call A-list species like that, I mean, we're losing things all the time. And a lot of the things people haven't even heard of. And if they haven't heard of them, they don't tend to care so much. But when you lose something like a rhino, a species of rhino that we all know about, and we all connect with and we all care about, that's when it's really, really sad.
Yeah, it is really sad. We thought we'd ask as well what your favourite place to enjoy nature is and why.
There are two that I really enjoy. For me, you know, going to the savannah in Africa, so somewhere like the Masai Mara. And I know lots of people go, the Masai Mara, it's overpopulated, too many tourists. But there's a reason for that, because it's a brilliant place to see wildlife. Yeah. And it was the first place in Africa that I went to see wildlife. And again, I went on holiday there probably about 4 years ago. And we went to a conservancy, which was absolutely amazing, because you know, there's only a few lodges that use that conservancy. So it's not like 25 minibuses round one pride, which can be hideous. Yeah. But you know, that again, that's quite a snobby attitude, because we're all tourists. I'm a tourist. Yeah. We're all tourists. So, but obviously you do get a better experience if there's not quite so many minibuses around.
It's hard to manage, isn't it? Get the balance
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I'm sure in years to come we'll be questioning the amount of ecotourism there is and the damage that it does. But, you know, when you see the Great Migration, and I've seen the sort of start of the Great Migration, you know, it's unbelievable when you've got all those wildebeest and zebra all crossing the river. It's absolutely unbelievable to watch. So that's one of the things. I mean, I love the African savannah and the African bush and seeing African wildlife. But the other is underwater. So to go diving and see wildlife underwater. And one of the best places I ever went is a place called Sipadan. And it's just... At the time, I don't think you can do it anymore, but at the time they had somewhere where you could stay on the island, and you basically walked, within walking distance of walking into the sea, there was a mile drop-off coral wall. So you just went in with your diving stuff, walked to the edge of the sea, walked a bit further, and down you went. So it was extraordinary. I think now, certainly the last time I went there, no one stays on the island. It's just a base. You stay elsewhere. But so I just love that, because it's such a privileged place to be. You know, we're not naturally equipped to go underwater like that, and it's silent. You know, so you can immerse yourself in that world and not have people yabbing.
Yeah, literally immerse yourself.
Yeah. So there are two for me, and those are the two.
Oh, lovely. Thanks.
Okay. So moving on to the British countryside. What are your thoughts on the rewilding of the British countryside?
I think rewilding is something that has to be done. It's really important. We have to have more natural spaces. We have to stop the amount of building and paving and concreting we're doing, and the amount of deforestation that's going on. And I can't believe I get tweets all the time saying, please help me, they're trying to build on this park or this woodland that we've got. And it all seems to be local areas that are just getting smaller and smaller. But we're up in the Cairngorms at the moment filming, and there's the most amazing and encouraging project up there called Cairngorms Connect. And it's lots of different landowners all working together which is sometimes a rare thing. And it's a 200-year project that they're looking at. So they're looking at this really long term. I mean, the people that started it obviously won't be alive in 200 years' time. And to have that sort of foresight to do something like that, I think is absolutely amazing. And I think it's a real example for other people to follow. And you know, they've got big plans, and they're reforesting, and they're bringing habitat back, and they're looking at the ecology. And, you know, it's a really intelligent conservation plan that, as I say, gets lots of partners working together. And that's the only way to go forward. And the trouble is, in this country and other countries as well, you know, people tend to want to do their own thing, and they work against that little group. We've all got to come together now. The time has come for us all to make a plan and make changes. So,
because it's hard to get people to focus as well close to home sometimes. I think people are all very aware of the wider world and the problems of wildlife, but when it comes to Britain, I don't think as many people are aware how much we're losing.
well, I think people are becoming
think?
aware, and I think this year in particular, we have been bombarded, I think, with what is going on in the world, you know, with Rebellion Extinction, with David Attenborough's programs, you know, there's with climate change programs, there's been so much information. I don't think there's anybody, unless they've got their head completely in the sand, that doesn't really know that we are in crisis mode as a planet. But now I think, because a lot of people feel like they can't do anything, we've now got to give people hope.
Exactly.
And that's, again, one of the things we're doing on Spring Watch, is doing the Garden Watch.
Yeah.
And,
So
you know,
get people
giving...
involved and think they can change things, because I guess people feel a bit stuck now.
It's
Getting people
empowerment.
to listen, isn't it?
I think if you empower people and then they think they're making a difference, it encourages them to do more and more. And I think it is very easy to sit there looking at things like the rhino crisis that's going, I mean, not just with the northern white rhino, but with poaching of rhinos generally. And, you know, the sort of wider world problems that you feel helpless about and you feel completely disempowered. And so when you give people a project that they can do in their back garden, start there, start on your own patch, rewild your garden. And that's what we're trying to encourage people to do. And if they can see the difference, I mean, again, on the series, we've shown a lady that has rewilded a garden. She bought a new house.
Yes, I saw that one,
Kate Bradbury.
It was in
she's amazing.
Portslade, wasn't it? Yeah.
And, you know, she's rewilded her garden, and already she can see the benefits of it. So I think if we can encourage people to do that, and they can see the benefit that just simple little changes make, then hopefully we can encourage them to think further than that.
Yeah. So is there a particular person or organisation you could say you admire the most?
I think all those people that I've already mentioned. I mean, there are just way too many to mention.
It's hard to narrow that down.
All, you know, the people like the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, you know, Daphne Sheldrick, Lona Drosha-Nielsen, who was the lady that I met at Animals Asia, you know, all these people are so incredible. And then on the programme last night, we were talking about Roy Dennis, who is instrumental in reintroducing ospreys into the country. You know, all those people that have just made such a difference. I mean, at the moment, I work with him, Chris Packham, but I hugely admire him because he doesn't just present wildlife programmes, he campaigns and he makes a difference and he makes enemies and he doesn't care, he ploughs forward. And, you know, you've got to have huge admiration for those people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then finally, have you got any tips for budding wildlife enthusiasts?
I think it's connecting with wildlife, connecting with the outdoors. And I think, again, on the programme, we had this amazing boy called Xander, who's a 12-year-old who is passionate about insects. And watching people like him give you real hope, because so many kids are disconnected from the outdoors and from wildlife these days. I mean, we all know, all us mums know, it's a battle between the screen time and getting them outdoors. And so I think it does rely on us as parents to encourage them to go out, to encourage them to look at wildlife, to get involved in nature. And it is a battle. I mean, for a lot of people, it is a battle, but we have to keep fighting that battle because I think it's really, really important not to disconnect. I mean, not just for wildlife's sake, but for our sake as well. I mean, we've proved now that connecting with wildlife benefits your well-being and your mental health. So it's a two-way thing. You know, we need to connect with nature for ourselves and for nature's sake. So I think it's just learn as much as you can and get passionate. And I think the more you learn, the more you love, the more you want to save something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Stay wild.